Hey girl gang, it's Dr. Joy here and you're watching Delivering Joy MD. So stay tuned because I am about to give you all the tea on the COVID-19 vaccination. I'll be talking a little bit about where we are in terms of infection rates, about how the vaccine was so quickly developed, the science behind why it works, and most importantly, can Black and brown people trust this vaccine? So make sure you keep watching. Alright girl gang, so let's jump right into this video because I've got lots to cover today. The first place I want to start is where we are in terms of COVID-19 infections. The infection rate is about 75 million people who have been infected with this disease, and 1.7 million people have died. It's really shocking to see the numbers in the United States because we only account for about 5% of the world's population, yet we have 20% of the world's infections in our country, which is absolutely shocking given that we are one of the richest nations in the world and spend the most on healthcare out of any other country. So let's just be clear. Our country did not do a good job handling this pandemic. Our leadership just was not the greatest, and we did not get this under control as quickly as we needed to. There was a lot of downplaying, and mask wearing and social distancing kind of became a political issue. That really hurt us. The other shocking thing about the United States is our health disparities. In the US, the vast majority of people who were killed by COVID were Black, brown, poor, or elderly. And so we have seen very clearly that Black and brown communities were disproportionately affected. The best way to convey herd immunity, which I'm sure you've heard this term thrown around, is not by letting the virus rampage through our country. In order to have herd immunity, 250 million of us would have to be infected with COVID-19. 10 million of us would subsequently die from that. So herd immunity and just letting the virus run wild through our country is not the right idea. In order to really confer herd immunity safely, effectively, and humanely, we need a vaccine. So now we've actually got 2 vaccines that have been reviewed by the FDA and that are now being given in our country. That's the Pfizer vaccine and the Mrna vaccine. So I'm going to be reviewing those with you today. And I want to really hopefully answer some of your questions about how these vaccines were developed so quickly, what makes them work, and why communities of color can trust these vaccines. Let's talk a little bit about Operation Warp Speed. So, in terms of how we were able to go so quickly, it was really because we now have really great molecular genomic techniques, which basically is a fancy way of saying we know how to map out the genes of different species, including viruses like SARS-CoV-2. So if we all think back, we remember that the first time we really started hearing about this SARS-CoV-2 was back in December of 2019. By January of 2020, the genome for SARS-CoV-2 had already been mapped, y'all. That's right, less than 30 days. And that's because we now have the molecular technology to do that. And by February, there were 3 different vaccine options already on the table, and folks were already moving forward towards development. And so that is why this Operation Warp Speed actually worked. In March, most folks had already started clinical trials. So whenever we think about FDA clinical trials, we're thinking about 3 different phases. There's the first phase where there are just a few people to see, if this thing is safe, if it's killing people, what's going on. Then the second phase is a larger group of folks. And then the third phase is 30,000 people. So we have had lots and lots of people enrolled in these studies. So about 30% of the folks enrolled in this study were healthcare workers because we are more likely to come in contact with the virus. And so we wanted to see that even at maximum exposure, that this vaccine actually worked. So the other thing that you should know is that whenever there are studies that are going on, we have certain quotas we have to meet. We have to make sure that we have representation from everybody, and I do mean everybody. So folks who are white, Black, Asian, Latinx, Hispanic descent, who are elderly, who live in rural areas, who live in metropolitan cities. So we are looking for a sample of the United States population when we're doing these trials. So I have been able to really review this data, and I have been satisfied that at least 10% of the folks who were in these clinical trials looked like me. And there were also folks who were of Latinx descent, who were involved in these trials. And so I was satisfied that the demographics of these trials was solid, and that we were able to get a good sample of our population. So that's number one. And the way that we were able to do this so quickly is that while the clinical trials were going on, we were also ramping up production because we really believed that these vaccines were going to work. That was how Operation Warp Speed was able to go so quickly, that we are doing things now in a few days that used to take us months or even years to do. So the technology has come a long way, baby. There are 3 types of vaccines that are actually out here. So there is a protein-based vaccine, there is a vector-based vaccine, and then there's an mRNA vaccine. All of these vaccines are all geared towards developing immunity against the spike protein. And the spike protein actually is the protein that allows the virus to attach to our cells and to cause infection. And because these receptors for the spike protein are in so many tissues all throughout the body, we see such a wide variety of symptoms. So we talked about headaches and fevers and loss of taste and smell and nausea and vomiting and diarrhea and muscle soreness and all these other things. And that is because that spike protein can attach to cells of all different types throughout the body. So by targeting the spike protein, the idea is that we build immunity to that particular protein, and we're able to fight it off and keep it from attaching to our cells and infecting us. So now let's focus in on the 2 that are out there now, because those are the ones that people are making decisions about right now, and that is the mRNA vaccines. So when we think about how a cell works, we know that the master recipe for creating the cell is in the DNA. Well, DNA codes for RNA, and RNA then tells the cells what type of proteins to make. So with the spike protein mRNA vaccines like Pfizer and Moderna, the mRNA for the spike protein is actually enclosed in a fatty envelope called a liposome, and then it's injected into our arm. Once it's injected, those liposomes are able to slide into the cells and release that mRNA that codes for the spike protein. So of course, the cells start to make that spike protein. So we are not injecting virus into folks. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. We're not actually giving people the virus, but we are causing our own cells to make the spike protein so that that spike protein can be presented to our immune system, and our immune system can make antibodies against the spike protein. So it's not a killed form of the virus, it's not any form of the virus, it's actually a map for making the spike protein. So that's one thing that a lot of people have been very confused about, and we want to make sure that's clear. So once we've had the initial injection, the second injection is given 3 to 4 weeks later, and that's a booster. And we know that after the second injection, both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine convey about 95% protection against COVID-19. So both of these vaccines use the same technology. The only difference is the fatty liposomal envelope. So Moderna's liposomal envelope allows it to be stored at a regular freezer, while the fatty envelope that Pfizer is packaged in needs to be stored at a colder temperature and requires a special freezer. In terms of distribution sites for vaccines, the vaccines are only being shipped to places that have the capacity to store them properly. So we can be sure that once our vaccine comes to us, we are getting a good vaccine that has been properly stored. So the goal is 60 to 70% of people being vaccinated. That will convey herd immunity. So when you hear people talk about like the polio vaccine, we have to make sure that the majority of the population is vaccinated so that we don't see widespread disease. So the main question I really want to answer for you guys today is, can we trust this vaccine? And not only all of us as a country, but specifically Black and brown communities. Can Black and brown communities trust this vaccine? And my answer is yes. I have been satisfied and I feel very confident recommending this vaccine, that we were included in the trial, and even more, that we have been involved in every step of the development of this vaccine, including FDA approval. Black and brown scientists have brilliantly developed this vaccine, and it's based on the lifetime work of a Black woman named Kizzmekia Corbett. And she has been doing work in this area for years. People are saying that mRNA medication is a new thing, and actually it's not. There are about 32,000 papers out there on folks using mRNA for medical purposes to treat disease. Because Black and brown people have borne the burden of this disease in our communities, I think it's very important that we use our voice to demand that we who have the highest risk of dying, not because we're Black or brown, but because of the social determinants of health in this country, that we speak out and that we demand that we have access to this vaccine. Don't turn down your opportunity to be vaccinated because of a lack of education or lack of information. And the 4 historically Black medical schools are being mobilized to really engage with Black and brown communities and to make sure that we all have an opportunity to understand the science and to make informed decisions that benefit us and our families. A lot of times people are so distrustful of the system. There have been some serious missteps, some atrocities actually, that have been done in the name of scientific advancement to Black and brown people. If we think about the Tuskegee experiment, if we talk about the Henrietta Lacks story, we know that many Black and brown people have not received the appropriate care and therapies and have been experimented on. We know that many Black and brown folks are the essential workers who can't stay home and telework. We know that Black and brown folks tend to live in multi-generational households. We know that Black and brown folks may have a lower socioeconomic status and may, be living in segregated communities. And so that is why we're at higher risk of having COVID-19. There is nothing biologically wrong with Black folks. There is, however, something wrong with systemic and institutionalized racism. I got a chance to see a fantastic presentation over the weekend by Dr. James Hildreth, who is the president of Meharry Medical College and who sits on the FDA advisory board. And he really candidly shared how the process worked, what things took place, how the vote went. It was very eye-opening and educational, but the thing that impressed me the most about his presentation is that he allowed 70+ female physicians to grill him for the better part of 2 hours, and he answered every question. I think that all of us left that presentation satisfied that we could recommend this safely for Black and brown communities. So shout out to Dr. Hildreth, and shout out to my alma mater's president, Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice, who took her vaccine in front of millions of people. Check the description box below, I'll have it linked down there. And so it was very important to me as a Black woman scientist and physician that I felt comfortable with the science behind this vaccine, and that I felt comfortable that all of the appropriate measures have been taken to ensure that this is a safe vaccine. So I feel good about that. I'm gonna get vaccinated. Of course, I'll be talking to you guys as I do, telling you about my first vaccine, the time period in between, and my booster vaccine and how I'm feeling. We have really borne the burden of disease and of death. And so I think that we need to be first in line for this vaccine and not pass up our opportunity to receive life-saving treatment. I hope that this helps to answer a lot of questions. If you have a question I didn't answer and you want to see a deeper dive on something, please post it in the comments below. Subscribe here so that you don't miss a single Delivering Joy MD TV episode. I wish all of you a happy holiday, and I will catch you on the next video, girl gang.